Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission, City of Pearland, June 4th, 2018, 6:30 p.m. Let the record show Troy Pradia is not present. All other members are. Moving on to item 2, the consent agenda. We have 2 items. Consideration, possible action, approval of minutes and excused absence. Approve the P&Z regular meeting minutes from May 21st, 2018. Item B, consideration, possible action, the preliminary plat of Riverstone Ranch, Section 10. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Motion passes 5-0. 6. We're missing. Threw me off. Forget we're down 1. Okay. We have no new business on the agenda. Moving on to item 3, discussion items. Item 1, City of Pearland subdivision and planning process. Ask staff.
Vince Husted, city staff. This presentation covers some general topics regarding the planning process. Basically, it goes over when a plat is required, types of plat, the interlocal agreement between the city and county, as far as platting is concerned in the extraterritorial jurisdiction, plat submittal guidelines, plat approval committee, plat approval process. For the sake of brevity, I won't go too much into the engineering's responsibility for platting. When is a plat required? A plat is required to subdivide property. It's also required in combining or developing property, or prior to the issuance of a permit for any building or structure on the property. In the city of Pearland, in order to obtain a building permit, a property must be platted. These go over a few of the reasons for platting, but basically, to sum it up, it's the legal subdivision of land. Platting helps govern the size and layout of lots, and it also ensures open space in neighborhoods. It provides for street circulations, and it's also for an opportunity for the city to make sure that all of the infrastructure gets put in place for streets and utilities. Types of plats. Now, basically, there's 2 types of plats. The first type of plat is the plats that are approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Those are master plats, preliminary plats, and final plats. The rest of the plats on the list are approved administratively and do not require a vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission and are approved by staff. The exception would be replats, particularly residential replats. The reason is that the city does not want to have the platting process used by individuals who may wish to get away from their obligations as far as covenants and restrictions are concerned in their neighborhood. And so the city wants to make sure that the residential replats in particular get approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. However, those are pretty rare. The subdivision plats, the 3 types of plats that do get approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first type is a master plat. Generally, that is required when there is a property that's located in a planned development, and it ensures that the future plats for the property are approved in phases in an orderly manner that conforms to the planned development. So a master plat is much more than just a plat. It shows a lot of information such as the placement of buildings, landscaping, and amenities. Others, as a side note, other cities I worked in, they've had what they called preliminary plans that serve the function similar to master plats. So master plats are fairly comprehensive. The next is the preliminary subdivision plat. It gets more into the is the opportunity to look at a piece of property to see what would need to be done to develop that property. And in order to get the preliminary plat approved, it needs to conform to the approved master plat. But the preliminary plat, it's approved for properties whether or not they are in a planned development. So there will be a lot of preliminary plats that are approved and reviewed that are not covered by a master plat. And finally, we have a final subdivision plat, which is basically the final layout of properties in a subdivision. And that is the plat that gets recorded at the courthouse. And also the final subdivision plat, it strictly maps and outlines the boundaries of the properties in question and also shows any easements that affect the plat. This is basically a brief description of the master plats. The purpose of the master plat is to delineate the sequences and timing of development within a proposed subdivision. Various submittal requirements for master plat includes this list of items to make sure that the master plat conforms to the planned development. Then we get into preliminary plats. The purpose of the preliminary plat is a drawing of the proposed subdivision showing the layout of streets and lots and any other elements that are required by the UDC to make sure that the subdivision developed is consistent with the UDC. And it also has requirements that are similar to a master plat. Finally, we get to the final plat. The purpose of the final plat includes a survey description of each lot in the plat, and it also includes notes for the dedication and recording of any easements that are located within the plat. No lots can be developed or built upon prior to the recordation of the final plat. And the submittal of the final plat, some of its items are a little bit more strict because this is the point where you need to make sure that we have an approved traffic impact analysis and that we have a final copy of the drainage report and that we also have an approved and executed subdivision improvement agreement. At the master plat and preliminary plat stage, it's often helpful for applicants to be working on these other items to get them approved before they submit their application for a final plat. And finally, we get to our administratively approved plats. We have what is called development plats. Those are basically they are a way of formalizing the legal description of a lot of property within the city that often have just what we call a meets and bounds description. That's basically a survey of the property, but the development plat takes a meets and bounds description and simplifies that legal description. And it also gives a chance for the city to review any issues such as right-of-way dedication or any easements that need to be put in place to help serve the public. Next, we have minor plats. They are very similar to development plats, except the minor plat is generally the subdivision of land into anywhere from 2 to 4 lots, no more than 4 lots. But basically, this process is done for properties in which the infrastructure is generally in place, and it is not as an extensive review as with preliminary and final plats. We also have replats. They're required when there are major changes to a recorded plat, restriction or covenant may be proposed. These are things that sometimes might change the number of lots in the subdivision, but this is something in which all the owners of that particular subdivision have to sign off on. We also have what is called amending plats. These are usually required when there's minor revisions to a recorded plat. Occasionally, if a owner is needing to make a minor change to the plat, such as correcting a distance or location of a property line, or to correct a mistake that had been made on a previous plat, the amending plat is usually used as a mechanism for correcting mistakes. Submittal requirements for the minor amending and replats. Basically, for non-residential properties, we do require traffic impact analysis. Of course, there's also a plat application fee. We require utility company approval letters and other documentation that's basically intended to show that the owner actually owns the property that they're dividing, or that they have the permission of the owner to subdivide the property. Generally, in my work experience, I'm usually working with the surveyors, and I don't always meet the people that actually own the property, but it's very important to make sure and guarantee that the property is done with the permission of the owner. And finally, we have what's called an interlocal cooperation agreement with Brazoria County. Basically, it's an agreement for the city to exercise subdivision regulations within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. Types of plats accepted in the ETJ. Generally, they're the same as what is accepted in the city limits, with a few minor details that are different. The biggest difference is we do not review development plats for residential properties within the ETJ, because generally, usually when somebody is getting a permit in the ETJ, it's to get a septic permit or build a house. But in all the plats, whether approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission or by city staff, the decision is to either approve a plat with conditions, or deny a plat. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, Commissioner's Activity Report. Anyone? Mary, have anything? Nothing? Hearing none. Item 3, our next regular meeting is June 18th, 2018. Staff have anything else to add? Hearing none. Move on to item 4, adjourn at 6:42.